Welcome to Mission Minded, the podcast where we explore outside-the-box thinking in carrying out Christ's Great Commission. On this week's episode, we are joined by Missionary Kevin Donaldson. Our sponsor for today's podcast is Dignity Roasters Coffee, locally roasted and packaged by the distressed to fuel each day. Dignity Roasters was born through a passion to partner with the distressed and the desire of bringing the universally loved beverage of coffee to your hands. To order your own coffee or to learn more about Dignity Roasters, visit their website at dignityroasters.com. Now here's your host, Jim Tingler.
Hi, and welcome back to the Mission Minded Podcast. I'm Jim Tingler. I'll be your host today with a special guest in the studio. Hey, Kevin.
Hi.
So, Kevin, tell us a little bit about what brings you to ITEC today.
Wow, this goes pretty far back. I mean, I was involved in Missionary Aviation for many years, and actually it was through accident, if you want to put it that way, shoot down, that came to know Steve, and ended up here to see what he was doing, and ended up involved with the Maverick and the flying car that he was involved with, and powered parachutes, and just the contact through that.
You have so much to this story, and as we'll unpack that today, just appreciate the time, for you to stop by Central Florida, but you're based out of Philadelphia area,
just outside of Philly. Yeah.
So it's kind of a win-win because we're still in some cold weather season here. So it's probably a welcome change from being up in Philadelphia.
We continue to escape all of the winter we can.
Yeah. So Kevin Donaldson, and as you just mentioned, you have a story many would know that goes back to Peru, and that would be involving an accident in aviation.
Right, in 2001, when I was flying with a family of missionaries from down the Colombian border back to where we were based in Iquitos, Peru, and it was part of the drug interdiction program that the Peruvian government had set up with the U.S. government, CIA, flying the plane. And it was part of that mistaken identity, really a failure to follow procedures on their part, that they misidentified us and shot us down. And the wife and baby girl that I was flying were killed. My husband and son survived, but I ended up shooting down the plane, and a whole lot that went along with that.
Yeah. Hard to believe that's been almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, you're in what type of plane?
We were flying a Cessna 185 on floats because it was on the Amazon River and all the tributaries, so float plane was really the only option.
So not a huge plane at all?
No, little six-seater.
And what shot you down was not a small plane?
It was a little two-seat, what they used as an attack plane, a little Cessna, Cessna jet, but and it was what the military used there, and it was part of a program they'd had gone for probably 5 years, because Peru was a huge exporter of cocaine, the largest exporter in the world at that time of cocaine, through Colombia. So they tried to stop those flights from going from Peru into Colombia. And although, when you look back at it now, you see I'm flying the wrong direction. We weren't going into Colombia. We were coming from Colombia. And, the U.S. had set up with a tracking plane that they would fly. And, we're supposed to identify, okay, this is an unidentified plane. And then they would call the Peruvian military and say, we need to intercept and find out what's going on. And they had a list in their plane that had my tail numbers on it, and they just didn't follow procedure. Over the 5 years, they had got lax, and so procedure wasn't followed. They didn't intercept correctly. They say they did, but it was part of their excuse was that they couldn't fly slow enough. Flying a float plane, it gets pretty slow. They're in a jet, and they couldn't fly slow enough to do a proper intercept, but that wasn't my problem,
Right.
And so, but as a result of that, they didn't properly identify us and ended up shooting us down. 40 rounds hit the airplane, and went down on fire, and managed to God protected some of us, but had his will in the other too.
Yeah, I could imagine that's been a difficult chapter, certainly for your life.
Yeah. I mean, God opened a lot of doors through it as well. Not just for us, but for the husband and his son there that was able to do a lot of speaking and colleges especially, just to make kids more aware of missions and of make the best of the time you have. And, so God has, bright side to everything, even though it's hard when you're going through it to see that.
Yeah. And so you were just transporting the family, just probably a normal transportation route. And it was husband, wife, and 2 kids. Normally
we didn't fly to the border area so much, but it was because the daughter, the little girl, they were actually adopting her. So we had to do paperwork out of the country and back into the country as part of visa, which, happens a lot in these. So that's why we had flown to the border area. But it was an area that, taking off from there, I had no radio contact until I was in the air and able to make radio contact. But as a result of that, they started tracking me right away because it just happened that the plane was in that area, the CIA plane. And so,
yeah, wow. So there's been a lot of stories created. I mean, you can go and read articles and plenty of information about that story. But there's more to what God's done in your life. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that today as well. As there's, this often we think of a journey to being involved in mission is a certain path. But we like to explore different ways in the way people have gotten there and then what God has done in and through their life since then. And so I don't want to make light of that story. It's a very important story, but was there any recommended resources that you would have people if they wanted to learn more about that 2001 Peru incident?
Well, I mean, there's still a lot that you can find online, but I was actually, somebody we had just visited had a folder file, which we often get people say, I kept all these newspaper clippings. And I was just reading through it actually this morning, and a whole lot of errors, because news, they're trying to just grab the first thing they can.
Sure.
And you see a lot of errors there, but the general idea is still there. And you can Google it, and it's there. So
what was the family's name?
The family were the Bowers family. Yeah, Jim and Ronnie Bowers, and then Cory was the little boy, and Charity was their little daughter.
Yeah. So unfortunate, but God's working all things together for good. Even from this side of heaven, we'll not know the outcome.
Right.
But you were in Peru as a missionary pilot, and you had been there for quite some time.
Yeah, we had been there. 2001. We'd probably been there for 12, 13 years or so. Yeah, and I had grown up there. I was a missionary kid from Peru. My parents were missionaries on the Amazon River, and so I had grown up in river villages there, and so it was sort of home to me. But we had been there as a family, for a while.
Wow, that's great. So how long was your family down in Peru?
We were there for a total in the end of 15 years as a family. After the shoot down and all, we did return. The mission had no plans then of restarting an aviation ministry. The plane was a total loss, and it was just, personally, I didn't want to fly there anymore. I had an interest in aviation, certainly, but I didn't see it there. So we stayed a bit longer. They'd wanted me to teach in the Bible Institute. I gave a shot at that, but I'm not a speaker. It's not my thing. I might feel my gifts are more, helps and being there, working with my hands. And so it was through that wanting to continue in aviation that our focus was switched to a different part of the world. And so that's where God led then.
That's great. Before we get back to it, I think it's an important thing to note. You grew up in Peru with your family. And when did you feel a call to aviation?
Actually, it wasn't until later when I came back to the U.S. then for high school and developed an interest in aviation, not really through anybody in the family that flew or anything, but as most young men, if you're looking at aviation, you look at the military, go the fun, exciting way. So I was looking towards the Air Force and flying that way. And it was actually in my senior year, through the president of the mission that my parents were with. He was speaking at a camp conference, and afterwards I was talking to him, and he asked what my plans were. And I said, well, I'm interested in aviation with the Air Force. And he said, well, God can use aviation. And he pointed me towards what then was Piedmont Bible College in North Carolina, that had an aviation program specifically set up for training missionaries. And so I said, no, okay, I'll go look into it. So I went, visited, and ended up there the next year.
That's great. I mean, you saw the need for aviation as a part of, working in remote places growing up.
Yeah, certainly the Amazon River it's not a nice straight river. It winds and winds. And so the time savings is immense in an airplane as opposed to in a boat. And with my parents, they had always used a boat traveling the river. And so I had seen that. And my dad was sort of an itinerant preacher who traveled along the river and taught. And so when I finally got there with the plane, he was my best customer. Saved him a lot of hours in a boat.
What would be an example of that? I've heard a lot of the different scenarios and time, boat versus plane.
Oh, yeah. There were places there that to go in a boat would take 4 to 5 days that I could fly in 45 minutes in an airplane.
Yeah. That's night and day right there.
Yeah.
So Peru, obviously growing up there, you had a heart for it. You served there for a number of years, but there's another chapter after Peru. So maybe take us on that journey. What happened next?
Okay. Yeah. We still had, like I say, an interest in aviation, and it was through a contact through the mission with another fellow who was a pilot in Africa, in Uganda, Africa. And talking to him, he had gone to Uganda to fly, but that had also been closed. And so he was looking elsewhere as a means to getting into a closed country, to use aviation into a country that you couldn't get in as a missionary. And so one of our churches had paid for me to fly over and talk to him and see the work there. And just brainstorming together, we decided on an area of the Middle East to be able to get into using aviation. And so they were still pretty bound there. We could pull up pretty quick, so we did, and went then to the Middle East, and still not knowing what country we would be working out of, but we're there and doing a bit of Arabic language study, and at the same time doing survey trips into some of the countries there. But definitely with the idea that it wasn't going to be normal flying, it was going to be something more of a sport type flying as a means to reach, to be in the country as a business, and yet have a means of hanging out with whoever, young people and stuff in that way. And that's how we got into the idea of powered parachutes, which was, we actually then went and presented that to the mission organization, and everybody just sort of looked and said, okay, we've never had this before, but and basically said, okay, we'll give you the green light. We're not putting any money behind this, but, do your thing. And it's amazing how God opened doors there. And, we ended up in United Arab Emirates. But when, we wrote back to the mission, well, we got our visas now. And they're like, really? Wow. Yeah, it's a royal decree, because we ended up getting connected with a flying club owned by the royal family in the Emirates there. And visas were a royal decree from the sheikh, and set up our business there then at the flying club, and we're there for 9 years. Yeah.
So, and what type of flying? So for those who might not be pilots and aware, I know you mentioned sport and powered parachute, and so how do those operate, and what would those even look like to somebody who's not aware of it?
Yeah, it's very different. Yes. The whole sport idea being just a means to, to have fun flying, because there's pilots, there's airline pilots and all, who often are looking for just wanting to get back to the roots, the basics of flying. And that's what this club was set up for. Just small aircraft. And we did what we called fun flights, where people would come pay just to go for a flight. And the whole powered parachute side was something that they weren't doing there, but we saw as a unique thing. And it's basically a 3-wheeled cart, if you want to put it that way, with 2 seats and a propeller on the back that uses a parachute as its wing. And so when you run to take off, the wing comes up and you fly slowly. They're 25, 30 mile an hour airspeed and great visibility and just knees in the breeze, as we say, just out there in the wind. And so it was very enjoyable, and went quite well.
Yeah, it sounds like a unique way to use your passion for aviation and being on mission with it. Right.
Yeah, and the idea of these the ones we sold came as a kit from a company in Canada, and then they had to be assembled and and then do the training. And our initial idea was that we would get young people that would come and work with us in assembly. That perhaps we didn't see as clearly because ended up that most of them, they just buy whatever they want. They're not going to get their hands greasy to build anything. And so that was a little different, but being able to spend the time, with them actually and training them, and it was all based around a clubhouse. So a lot of the time, my wife had a huge opportunities there, just hanging out with the weekends. Whole families would come just to watch the airplanes or take a flight, and just the time sitting around, talking, chatting, asking questions, and just that personal contact is, because you can't be there just on a soapbox preaching.
Right. Yeah, I think that goes back to challenge that paradigm, of somebody who is going into the world of mission, and the idea that you're going to go and be on a soapbox somewhere. But in reality, God is using people as, somebody like yourself, using the talents that they have and passions, and saying, okay, what kind of business could I support and have in this context, and really bring value to a community. And then I'm reminded of Paul just becoming all things to all men for the sake of the gospel.
Yeah, that was from the very beginning. Had it been like that preaching and stuff, I would have probably never been in missions. But even from when I was a kid, my grandfather always said, learn anything you can, God will use it. And my bent was the mechanical side and that whole area. And so God used that, and I saw then through the aviation, with Missionary Aviation, the use of that aspect of it. But yeah, so much more.
That's great.
Yeah.
And so that season and chapter is kind of wrapped up for you now.
Yeah, we did. We left the Middle East back almost 9 years ago now, because of my wife's mother got cancer, and they'd asked us to come home to care for her. But we're sort of settled there in the Philadelphia area, but we still travel pretty extensively, 1 or 2 trips a year to the mission fields, and whatever areas, construction, and at this point, taking young people with us generally, if it's not too crazy of a trip, and just trying to pass the baton to get that interest in young people too, to see the world beyond their high school.
I love that. I love that part of your story. And so, how old are you?
I'm 62.
62. And so I think that's a great challenge for those that might, at that season of life have more freedom, maybe more resources to be able to do things that you're very concerned of passing on the baton to that next generation. And so what encouragement might you give to those that maybe are wrestling with, well, what would this next generation be interested in what I have to provide, or maybe a little bit insecure about that?
Right. Yeah. I've just seen, through the years that God can use anything, and it's now with the internet and all, and so much that you can search and find places like ITEC, that can have so many different branches and it's not just standing there preaching, that God can use in ways like that. And even the young people we've taken from our church, on construction projects, God can use a roofer, to do a project. Yeah.
Expand, get a vision for the field, and heart for his people working around the world.
Yeah, and at the same time, some of those will be, frontline missionaries preaching.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, Kevin, any final thoughts as we have just had an opportunity to have a quick conversation here about the work and the journey God's brought you on?
Nothing in particular, I guess. Just it's been good to come back. We always try to come back to ITEC now and then when we're coming through here and touch base. It's always something new happening here. And that's what's exciting. It's exciting to see the new angles that ideas and ideas that other people bring in, and just to take them. Sometimes they work. The whole Maverick, as we know here, and my experience with the flying car, it was an idea that it didn't quite develop as planned.
So you are certified. You're a pilot for the Maverick.
I came here and got checked out with the Maverick, and actually the first civilian one that they sold, was to the sheikh there in the Middle East that I had worked with, and it ended up being a little more complicated. It's not a simple machine, and they ended up crashing it. Nobody was hurt, but that one didn't end up so well.
Yeah. Well, it was a interesting journey. We've learned a lot. You've learned a lot. And again, God is working all things together for a bigger story than you or I can see this side of heaven. So
yeah, certainly is. There's reasons behind things that we don't know now, but you try to focus and take where God puts you and what talents He gives you, and work with them. Give them to Him, and He'll find a way to use them for sure.
Amen. So for those that might be wrestling, younger adults, and you're a little bit further along in life, do you feel that you've missed out on something by choosing a career and of purpose and being on mission?
Oh my, no. I like I say, I grew up in Peru, in river villages in the jungle. I had two older brothers who were twins, 16 months older than me. So we were just three boys in the jungle. When we come back to the States and people say, "Oh, do you know this TV show?" I'm like, we didn't even have electricity. No, I don't know anything about it, but we did this and this and this. And it was a fantastic way to grow up as a boy. And so, no, I nothing really I can say I feel I've missed by it. It's been a far bigger picture and a bigger world than most people that I find in America, stuck in their little world, their little bubble. Try to get them out of that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you doing that. And I'm very encouraged by the work that you're doing just in your local church, just being on mission and trying to include that next generation and the work that's going on around the world. So,
thank you.
Yeah. Kevin, thanks for joining us today. And
thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us on this episode of the Mission Minded Podcast.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Mission Minded. For more information on today's topic and show notes, please visit our website, itechusa.org. Mission Minded Podcast is produced by ITEC. The goal of this podcast is to inspire conversations about Great Commission participation. The views, organizations, and individuals represented, interviewed, and discussed on the podcast do not necessarily represent an official position or formal partnerships with ITEC.